I came across this video and I was shocked. Not surprised, I was shocked because what is explained in this video has to be something like it's supposed to go around every Nigerian home. That we get to listen to why, we get to know why this administration is failing Nigerians in terms of security. Please take your time and watch this video so you will know why we are in the situation we are in as a country.
Let me show you two numbers from the Nigerian government's Open Treasury portal. In 2025, the Presidential Air Fleet, that is the aircraft that transport the president and senior officials, received 20.27 billion naira, that is 97.76% of its budget, nearly every naira released. Now, look at this other line, same portal, same fiscal year, same treasury. The Nigerian Army's budget for the purchase of security equipment, 20.56 billion naira, budgeted. Amount released, 1.46 billion, that is 7.11%. Same government, same year, same treasury. One got everything, the other got almost nothing. During this budget cycle, according to Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, over 10,000 Nigerians were killed in security-related violence. We went to the government's own data to understand how this happened, and what we found was quite interesting. In December 2024, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu presented the 2025 federal budget to the National Assembly. He called it,
"This budget precedent, budget of restoration, securing peace, building prosperity."
The numbers backed up the name. The defense and security sector received 6.57 trillion naira, the largest allocation in Nigerian history. That is more than 12% of the entire federal budget. When the president introduced the 2026 budget a year later, he said something that matters for what comes next. He said, quote,
"We will invest in security with clear accountability for outcomes, because security spending must deliver results to secure our country."
Now, here's how the money was supposed to flow. The Nigerian Army was allocated 4.52 trillion naira. The Air Force 1.25 trillion. The Presidential Air Fleet, managed under the Office of the National Security Advisor, received its own allocation. On paper, this was the most funded military Nigeria has ever had. So, we went to the Open Treasury portal, the government's own transparency platform, and we checked what was actually released. The 2025 budget performance data tells a very different story from the one in the Appropriation Act. Army security equipment budgeted 20.56 billion, released 1.46 billion, just over 7%. Defense equipment, that is the weapons, vehicles and hardware the army needs to fight, 336.76 billion budgeted, released 16.71 billion, under 5%. Now, Air Force aircraft maintenance, the budget for keeping the military's aircraft operational, 34.71 billion budgeted, 4.85 billion released, that is about 14%. But it gets worse. There are budget lines that received 0 naira, not reduced funding, 0. Construction of military barracks, 206.97 billion budgeted, 0 released. Transport fuel for the army, 0. Aircraft fuel for the Air Force, that is the jets that are supposed to be providing air support in Borno, 0. Although a broader fuel aggregate shows some partial release. Then we have welfare packages for soldiers. I hope this doesn't get me in trouble. They got 0. Recruitment, 0. So the army can't buy equipment. The Air Force can't fuel its aircraft. Nobody is building barracks. Nobody is being recruited, and nobody is even getting welfare packages. But then we checked another line on the same portal. The Presidential Air Fleet, 20.74 billion naira budgeted, 20.27 billion released, that is 97.76%. The same treasury that released 7% for the army security equipment released 97% for the aircraft that fly the president. The same system that gave the Air Force 0 naira for aircraft fuel found a way to fully fund the fleet used for official transport. Now, when these numbers became public, the President's Special Advisor on Economic Affairs, Tope Fasua, pushed back. He said the comparison is unfair. His argument, the Presidential Air Fleet falls under recurrent expenditure, maintenance, fuel, operational costs. Those get released monthly. Military equipment, meanwhile, is a capital expenditure. Procurement, construction, capital releases, they follow different timelines and depend on cash availability. And honestly, that is a quite reasonable argument. Recurrent and capital expenditure do follow different rules in Nigeria's public finance system. If this explanation holds, it would account for the gap. So, we tested it. We went back to the Open Treasury portal and we pulled every military budget line that is classified as recurrent expenditure, the same category as the Presidential Air Fleet. And here's what we found. Every single line on this table is recurrent expenditure, same category as the fleet, same rules, same timelines. Maintaining the Air Force aircraft is recurrent. Servicing planes, repairing engines, it got 13.98%. Maintaining the President's aircraft is also recurrent, but it got 97.76%. Fueling the Air Force's jets, the ones flying missions over Borneo, is recurrent. It got 0. Fueling the President's jet, fully funded. Tope Fasua said you cannot compare recurrent with capital, and yes, he is right. So we compared recurrent with recurrent, and the gap is still there. The data does not support a structural explanation. The pattern points to a choice in priorities. But this pattern didn't start in 2025. Fleet spending has grown dramatically over the past decade, from 4.37 billion naira in 2017 to over 20 billion in 2025. And the proposed allocation for 2026 is 238 billion naira. Under this administration alone, cumulative spending on the Presidential Air Fleet is estimated between 169 and 179 billion naira. But here's where it gets structural. The Presidential Air Fleet sits under the Office of the National Security Advisor, the ONSA. So we checked ONSA's own budget performance. According to Budget, Nigeria's leading independent budget transparency organization, as of June 2025, halfway through the fiscal year, ONSA reported a capital budget utilization of 314%. They received 228 billion naira against an appropriation of 72.5 billion naira, 3 times their approved budget in 6 months. Now, President Tinubu himself admitted in December 2025 that only 17.7% of the entire 2025 capital budget had been released as of the 3rd quarter. That is the system-wide baseline. The Army's equipment budget got less than half of that. ONSA, the agency that supervises the Presidential Air Fleet, got 18 times that amount. And the transparency picture isn't any better. Transparency International's 2025 Defense Integrity Index rated Nigeria at high to critical risk of defense corruption. Military operations scored 12 out of 100, the lowest of any risk area across sub-Saharan Africa. The report specifically flagged significant gaps in defense spending transparency and noted that most military procurement is classified on national security grounds. It is possible that additional security funding flows through classified channels not visible on the Open Treasury portal. But if so, those channels were not sufficient to prevent over 10,000 deaths or the killing of 8 senior officers between January and April. So, the money that is released has almost no oversight. The money that isn't released is leaving soldiers on the front lines without equipment, without fuel, without support. And that gap has a body count. During the 2025 budget cycle, the year in which the military received 7% of its equipment budget, Beacon Security and Intelligence recorded over 10,000 Nigerians killed in security-related violence. By the 1st quarter of 2026, the number had reached 2,350 killed and over 1,100 abducted. And it's not just civilians. These are senior military officers, brigade commanders, battalion leaders, the people running this war. Between January and April 2026, 7 commanding officers and 1 brigadier general were killed in Borno State alone. 3 of those commanding officers died within days of each other. Brigadier General Musa Uba was captured by ISWAP in 2025 after an ambush near Wajiroko in Damboa, Borno State. They released footage of him in custody, and then they killed him. And during the 2025 budget defense session, the Minister of State for Defense made an admission that speaks for itself. The government had not paid group life insurance to the families of soldiers killed in action. He asked for 20 billion naira to settle what was owed to the dead. So the government could not pay its debt to fallen soldiers, but the presidential air fleet received 97.76% of its budget. Tope Fasua has publicly argued that recurrent and capital expenditure follow different rules and that the comparison between the fleet and military hardware is invalid. The government's own data shows that military recurrent lines, fuel, aircraft maintenance, welfare, recruitment, the same expenditure category as the fleet, also received near zero releases. The explanation he offered does not account for that gap. The Senate Committee on Defense has raised concerns. Chairman Ahmed Lawan said publicly that you cannot postpone the defense budget because it gives an edge to the enemy. But as of today, no formal investigation has been launched into why the government's own transparency portal shows these numbers. Now, I want to be clear. Everything we showed you in this investigation is publicly available. The Open Treasury portal, opentreasury.gov.ng, publishes budget performance data for every federal MDA. GovSpend, built by budget, tracks individual government payments. You can go to these platforms right now and verify every number. The 2025 budget implementation has been expanded to June 2026. When updated figures are published, we will be here with a follow-up. And if additional funds were released for military equipment, of course, we will report that as well. If they weren't, we will report that too. Now, the question this investigation raises is not complicated at all. The same government, the same treasury, the same fiscal year found a way to fully fund the fleet that carries the president and chose not to fund the equipment that protects Nigerian lives. The numbers are on the government's own portal. We didn't manufacture them. The bodies are in the ground. The question now is whether anyone will be asked to explain why.